thank you, dear Virtual Book Festival, for having me. And I'm sharing my screen. Yes, within the next, 25 minutes, you're going to hear my presentation about problem novels for teenagers as presented in the White Ravens Catalogue. The White Ravens Catalogue is a selection of books for children and young people that we select every year at the International Youth Library. So it's the place where I work. So this is it. And the library is the largest library for international children's and youth literature in the world, with a current collection of around 650,000 books. It collects children's and young adult books from all over the world. And this means that we do collect the books from different countries in the original languages. So that means that we do have books from Slovenia in Slovenian language, books from Brazil in Portuguese, and so on. The central task of the library is to promote global children's and youth literature. The annual program of the library tries to realize this task, which is also to empower global children's and youth literature by hosting exhibitions, readings, workshops, panel discussions, conferences, and also a literature festival. And within this bouquet of devices, the White Ravens Catalogue of the library plays its part as well. So here you see some of the recent White Ravens catalogs. It always presents 200 new children's book releases from more than 40 countries in over 30 languages. There are English language annotations for each of the selected titles, and here you see the book cover, the bibliographical data, and the English annotation of what the book is about. The term White Ravens is used to label especially notable outstanding books. And since 2012, we present the White Ravens in our database. And if you have time and you're interested, you are invited to browse the books that are in this database. How do we pick the books for the White Ravens? The library receives a vast number of donation copies of books every year. It's around 10,000 volumes that we receive. And from this big number, by publishing houses, by institutions, organizations, and friends of the library, the language specialists, so my colleagues and me, select the 200 new releases. We try to pull out new publications that catch our attention and strike us as noteworthy, and which we want to recommend to an international audience. In general, you can say that books are chosen based on the universal relevance of themes they address, of their literary and pictorial qualities, or the innovative content or design. But of course, it is very difficult and hard to really define what universal relevance is and what universal themes are, and how to define literary and pictorial quality. And as a result, the books of the selection are very different and broad. But even though there are gaps and many challenges, the White Ravens Catalogue is full of recommendations and reflects developments and discoveries in children's literature and book markets of different countries and of different regions in the world. Into the catalogue, we include picture books, children's books, teenage books, fiction and non-fiction. And in doing so, we try to give an international picture of what is going on in children's literature. And so it is with the field of the so-called problem novels for teenage readers. And within the last year, there have been some books included. And to find out which are the absolute favorite titles, I asked my colleagues what their favorite books are. And I had a quite fixed idea of what a classical problem novel is. For me, it should be a teenage protagonist that is facing a problem with family, with his or her sexuality, with violence, with society, with drugs. And he, she, or they are going through a tough, painful process to grow stronger. Sexual abuse, teenage pregnancy, mobbing, dark family secrets were on my mind as typical topics. Plus the search of identity. And I thought the story would be told from the perspective of that very teenage protagonist. And so I was surprised when I got the recommendations from my colleagues, which problem novels they would recommend. And so this is what I did receive. I did receive a broad range of interesting youth novels and non-fiction books written in verse, written as a thriller, as a notebook, as a childhood memory from multiple points of view and with various narrators, picking up many different issues. And before I start to present to you the examples in particular, I have to admit that I no longer have a really narrow and fixed definition of what a problem novel is. It seems the boundaries of what a problem novel is and what it is not have become more permeable and fluent. And so to me, it is a genre opening up regarding the style of the narrative, the attitude and tone, and also to a certain point regarding the content. Many plots you can still and immediately put into this typical problem corner, but it is the how of telling that is very often special, new, and interesting. Okay, so let's go and browse the examples. First, we meet teenage girl narrator Zaz in the book Needlework from Ireland. Zaz has been sexually and physically abused, but she's a protagonist who refuses to be defined by the rape and works her way to confidence through tattooing and creating art with tattoos. Then there is Mara. She's the bird girl in the title of the Argentinian novel. Mara flees from the abusive partner of her mother to live in a tree. And she needs to remember that she's valuable and has two helpers to achieve it. There is a young and shy guy named Dario and a retired woman named Leonor. And they are the various voices that tell the story of Mara. Both of these books find beautiful metaphors like the bird nesting or tattooing as the lifesavers and loopholes for the female protagonists. The next two books present, again, female protagonists that had to experience sexual abuse. In the Greek book, The Night When the Stars Went Out, Lena, a 12th grader, was raped and murdered. In the monologues of 9 characters, it becomes clear that the family relations are poisoned because the family blames the victim Lena that everything was just her fault. And so the book displays moral instability and social political deficits in a small Greek town. In the Polish novel, Like Grains of Sand, 17-year-old Nina kills herself. Her best friend Anya investigates and finds out that the teacher had drugged the girls and filmed them having sex. The book displays the whole grief and misery of a young woman trapped in her insecurity. And the story is told from Nina's and Anya's perspectives. The theme of sexual harassment seems to play a very important role in the problem novels of the last years. In the Colombian book, Crocodile with Pink Flower, we meet the 17-year-old Teresa sexually abused by a family friend at the age of 8. What was long concealed and suppressed is now brought into the open and articulated. This painful process of coming to terms with the past is evident from the narrative. When Teresa speaks of the present, she uses the first person voice. And when she speaks of her childhood, she switches to the more distanced third person voice. In the Lithuanian book, Black Water, it is the 16-year-old Annika that has to come to terms with the past and with her own identity. As a child, she experienced marginalization, bullying, and familiar problems, and she moved to another town. When she returns to her childhood village, her external appearance has changed and no one recognizes Annika. And so she's going back to a journey of her past without the other people in her childhood village knowing and recognizing her. And the book turns, because of this, into a very mysterious and gloomy thriller about human chasms, and is really a thrilling read. The Serbian book, The Call, shows that a problem novel can be a thriller as well. Here we meet Stefan and his life story. He's an adopted child and moved from Serbia to Canada. Returning to Serbia, Stefan is searching for his roots and for himself. He is looking after his biological mother and the reasons why she gave away her boy. The story is told from multiple points of view, which make the investigations about what happened back then very thrilling. In the British book, Homegirl, The Miseducation of Naomi Brissett, the 14-year-old Naomi is growing up in a precarious city district called Crompton, and she's growing up in a care system. Pretending to be unbreakable, tough and strong, Naomi is insecure and wants to go away from it all. When her caretaker puts her, a white girl, into a black foster family, things start to change for real. The book is fast-paced, witty, tender, tragic, and full of courage, just like Naomi. And it shows that problem novels can have really funny sides too. The American book, Long Way Down, is really breathtaking. It is a verse novel, and it is about a young boy facing a terrifying dilemma. When his older brother, Sean, is shot in the street due to gang violence, 15-year-old Will knows what is expected of him. The rules are no crying, no snitching, and always seek revenge. The gun is tucked into Will's belt, and scared to death, he steps on the elevator. In the 60-second ride down to the ground floor, he's joined by the ghosts of friends and family members who were all killed following these rules and are now voicing their opinion. Still, the decision what to do is for Will to make. The book describes in intense verses only this 1-minute ride and leaves the readers breathless. It shows how a combination of social surrounding, cultural and ethnic background, reign of how you live and what you are supposed to do, even if you do not want to. The next book comes from Japan. It is called The Opposite Shore, and it is about socioeconomic differences. It displays the social problem of condemning welfare recipients in Japan. A tough girl named Itsuki takes care of her invalid mother and her younger sister. The family is receiving welfare help, but Itsumi's classmates condemn it as laziness. Then she meets Kazuma, an insecure boy who had to leave the expensive top-ranked school because he did not succeed there. Both teenagers have feelings of inferiority, suppressed anger, and helplessness, but together they learn how to cope with this from their different angles. Then we meet the 15-year-old Alan, and he's making the experience of being labeled and put into a certain corner by society and by politics as well. The Swedish novel Foreigner Attenuation Process is about Alan, and he's a third-generation immigrant, and he should be made into a real Swede by taking classes in Swedish and learning more of the customs. But Alan already speaks Swedish fluently, is integrated perfectly, But this is beside the point. What it means, being a real Swede, is not even clear at any moment of the book. And the novel reveals the big absurdity of what Swedization is. And you have to know that this project really was initiated by a rightist Swedish party in 2014. And this book is a very cynical and ironic comment on this absurd project. Then we have the book All Foreigners Have Closed Curtains from Norway, and it explores how cultural and ethnic background and economic stratification intersect to define the experiences of the young protagonist. In this case, the novel's first-person narrator, Mariana. She has a mom from Chile, a Norwegian dad, and a brother in jail. At her school, potatoes, as she calls ethnic Norwegians, are a minority. And they are also a minority in Romsås, a city district in Oslo with many high-rise buildings where Mariana lives. In the book, Mariana talks about the burden of having a brother in jail, of her dreams and fears, her family, of small and big conflicts, of her friends, and of Me Too, her love interest. The novel is bursting with Mariana's loud and colorful, confident and cheeky language. And it is written in a highly linguistic liveliness with wrong syntax and neologisms. And it reminds a bit like the book Tiger Milk of German author Stephanie de Velasco, which was present in the presentation of Tilka Jamik already. The next two books were both published in adult fiction publishing houses. Both are partly autobiographical and shine light on growing up in non-democratic systems. Mimi, the first-person narrator in the German book When I Ate Brandied Cherries with Hitler, is growing up in the GDR. She describes the collapse of the system as a fundamental watershed that happened to coincide with her coming of age. The old does not longer count, and Mimi's life in a new country and in a new political system is dominated by existential insecurity, causing frustration and raw violence. While she becomes a leftist punk and tries her hands at journalism, her childhood friends start to call themselves Goebbels and Hitler and go to the very right. Then we have the novel 5 Times I Saw My Father. It is from Haiti, and it is a painful inner journey into childhood during the dictatorship of Jean-François Duvalier. Author and protagonist Guy Regis Jr. remembers his enigmatic, contradictory father who unexpectedly appears in the life of the boy and disappears again. He remembers his no less mysterious mother who raised Guy by herself. The novel shows the parents' inability to answer their son's pressing questions relating to origin, family, and homeland. What came up to me is a question: can these childhood memories be problem novels? And I wasn't sure how to answer it. The question, what is central for a problem novel, holds true for the last 4 books of my presentation as well. The German book Vogelschorsch is the portrait of 17-year-old person Birdie George. He's nonconformist and he's unintentionally provoking everyone around him. Birdie George is always surrounded by an aura of melancholy and enigma. To animals, he feels close, but with people, it is difficult. The story of Vogelschorsch is told by the girl Lena, and this she does with a keen sense for human interaction. She's fascinated by George's sensitivity and his otherness. The special relationship that develops between the 2 teenagers confuses Lena's friends. The strong ambivalence between joy and sadness stays in the book the whole time and makes the novel a really special reading. Another interesting aspect are the expressive, beautiful illustrations accompanying the text. Visual elements like drawings, sketches, sometimes also photographic snippets or handwriting play an important role in the Portuguese book. This is a good place as well. 17-year-old protagonist Tristeza is sandwiched between the status of not being a kid anymore and not yet being an adult. She has a love of notebooks, and readers follow her life, her dreams, her fears and thoughts through the pages of a diary. Each entry is no longer than 2 pages and written by hand, script or pasted in. The notebook does not especially focus on problems, but which teenagers' life actually is without problems. It concentrates on becoming a beautiful example of a young human mind in transition and of a young personal insight. The last 2 books are examples from Scandinavia, and they expand the genre of teenage problem novel. The Swedish title, In My Name, a book about being transgender. I'm sorry, in the presentation it's still transsexual, but the correct translation is transgender, is a nonfiction book, and it is a compendium of chats and talks and interviews that the author led with many different young people and with Swedish role models who identify as trans. Through these interviews and tips and facts, the readers get poignant and nuanced depictions of transgender reality. The book reflects on the reception of trans people, explains concepts, and gives readers answers to questions that they may not always dare to ask. It is an important, multifaceted, and informative book about being a trans person today. And it is rendered in a clear language and offers a wealth of information without rambling on. And then we have the Norwegian book, When Will I Be Old Enough to Shoot My Father? And this book presents poems for teenagers, focusing a family in which the father terrorizes everyone. The poems talk about psychological abuse through words and physical violence. They talk about an unpredictable man who makes his child feel small in order to make himself powerful. And it is about a boy who has no friends because he's always angry and unapproachable. The poems talk about powerlessness and anger. Written in a dense lyrical language, the poems seem to be both a therapy and an act of self-empowerment for the narrating voice. So, and here we are with this strange pink thing on the page. And after a ride through 18 books for teenagers that can be located in the field of problem books. In my presentation, I went from rather typical problem novels, which you can see here, to books that are more on the edge of the genre, like the last 2 examples, for example. There were tragic, wounded protagonists in precarious life situations. There were thrillers and childhood memories. There were first-person narrators and multiple voices and perspectives. There were funny and cynical moments. There was death and hope. There was verse and poetry, interview and illustration, fiction and nonfiction. And while you have a broad range of aspects, very different aspects for each book, to me, they all share something, because all of these books for young people, they do not just take their protagonists seriously, but they also take their readers seriously. And in this, they seek to arming them for life, to making them stronger. So thank you for your attention. That's it.
Katja.